Worldless is the debut title coming from the newly indie developing studio Noname Studios and was published through Co-Sync, which is a subsidiary of Thunderful Group, who also published other titles such as Phantom Spark, Kingdom 2 Crowns, the up-and-coming title Replaced, and many others. According to the official website, they also provided a hand in the development of other titles such as Dendara, which we have done a review for. You can check it out for yourself. Link will be in the description below. Today we're going to be rocking out with the PlayStation version, so let's get into it. So in a galaxy far, far away, oops, this ain't Star Wars, there seems to be a constant battle between two opposing enigmatic forces. How did this eternal conflict begin? For the most part, it isn't mentioned, but it is acknowledged that it just always has been this way for a mighty long time. However, in the midst of this never-ending war, spanning across the galaxy, we are introduced to this one single entity which, due to its color, can easily assume which team is battling for. Serving as the main character of the game, we follow it, and over time as it matures, we discover that unlike other entities of its kind, this one possessed some peculiar attributes never before seen by the denizens of this world, which could change everything. Now, are these changes welcomed by those accustomed to this seemingly loop of war between opposing sides? Well, that's yet to be seen. How this game looked was the first thing that grabbed my attention the first time I saw this game's trailer. Worldless utilizes this less is more approach in terms of its character designs. They themselves, along with how this game decided to do its maps, are just composed of lines and simple geometric shapes reminiscent of star constellations. If anybody hasn't said it already, the main character may have probably got its unique style from the main protagonist Rayman, seeing as though what keeps your main character limbs together are invisible. That is, until an action is performed which gives a more realized silhouette of the character. This doesn't just go for you, but seemingly all of the creatures, some of which resembles mythical and biblical creatures such as angels, demons, animals, you name it. And while we're talking about the characters, it would be highly disrespectful of me not to talk about an element that is a character in and of itself, and that would be the environments. The unique and authentic aesthetic presented within the various areas that you will find yourself traveling through. From the majestic and gorgeous to the apocalyptic, I found that all came with a certain charm with new ideas as far as game mechanics to maneuver through its areas. Speaking of game mechanics, Wordless is a two-dimensional metroidvania-esque side-scrolling puzzle platformer with a unique blend of real-time and turn-based combat. The player has the ability to move left and right and can jump to get to his destination. However, I will go more into depth by breaking down the two major components, which are indeed combat and exploration. Combat in Wordless starts off somewhat simple but becomes complicated as one mechanics gets stacked up on top of another. So as I stated before, Wordless has some RPG elements fused with real-time combat. When the player engages with an opponent, you and your enemies take turns attacking and defending. When it is your turn to attack, you have to take note that at the bottom of your character is a gauge that appears to run out every time it's your turn to be on the offensive side. This bar actually is the time limit the player has to input and execute attacks, which can come in the forms of magic and spells of various kinds and levels, fire, wind, ice, and lightning, and of course physical attacks, which all can be strung together. On top of this, you also have the ability to block, and for me this is where things become a tad bit challenging. Blocking, like most games, can be utilized for so long and has its limitations on what you can block and how long you can do it. The same concept applies here, but what you have to block with can't be utilized for a long period of time because that durability, after a couple of hits, it goes away, leaving you open for any and all attacks that I hope that you will be able to endure, but 9 times out of 10 probably won't. And this is where those shields come into place. See, you have these shields that you can put up, however you have to utilize them for specific attacks. In other words, you have to block physical and magical attacks with the corresponding proper shield, or else you will risk losing your health, which is located at the bottom part of your screen. If this goes all the way down, the player will expeditiously be ejected up out of the combat sequence. And since you are basically immortal and can't be unalive, there is no such thing as a game over screen. This allows the player to try again until they understand how to defeat their opponent. But even with that, things are a tad bit more complex because defeating an enemy is okay, but it will ultimately be a disservice to you if you just do that. The best thing to do is try to absorb your enemies so that you will be able to obtain these ores that the player can then apply via their skill tree in order to obtain better skills, shields, techniques that can pretty much help turn the tide of battle. Absorbing your enemies is very important, but how you do that is another element of combat that is slapped on that you also have to be mindful of. So if you take a look at this one side of the screen, you will notice this gauge that will either go up or down. This is your absorption gauge, which can increase and decrease depending on what the player does. If the player adheres to the symbol that is present with the corresponding proper attack type, then the gauge goes up. If the player diversifies their attacks, it goes up relatively quicker. And if you hit the enemy with what they are weak to, it goes up as well. However, if you receive damage, it goes down. One way you can defend yourself and stop this does come from what I mentioned before, blocking. One of the most important ways the player can determine which attack is coming can be seen with these lines that will appear on the enemy before they attack. All of their moves for the most part are telegraphed within a split second with the showing of vertical and horizontal lines. Vertical lines mean that a magic attack is about to hit you, whilst horizontal lines mean that the attacks are going to be physical. When playing Wordless, in the beginning, the battles make sure that the player gets the concept down pat before introducing enemies who will start to mess things up by doing combos that will incorporate both. Once I understood this, a lot of the battles began to possess some type of rhythm to it. Now, I've spoken about the different shields and how to differentiate between which one is necessary, but there is something called the perfect block or parry, if you will, that once done will save you from receiving damage and can open up a window of opportunity for the player to take advantage of, given obtain the proper skills to do so. Once the meter gets to a halfway point, you can then begin the absorption, where the player will have to input a button sequence for the absorption to be complete. The more this gauge is filled up, the more buttons will be revealed. One strategy that I used, and I'm sure that other people that have played this game probably use the same strategy as well, and that's essentially filling up the absorption meter halfway and then just button mashing during the input sequence in hopes that you'll get it right eventually. If you, for whatever reason, is able to fill this gauge up completely and initiate the absorption sequence, no button inputs will be required. You'll pretty much just absorb them. As I said before, all of this sounds a tad bit complicated, as if the battle itself is a puzzle, and to be honest, it is. But when it comes down to mastering attacking and also blocking and parrying, it is paramount that you learn how to do this. And I mean practice, because there are going to be some bosses that you come up against and they come in swinging. I literally mean it. They come in swinging. So if you ain't mastered this or don't know how to dodge their attacks or parry, yeah, you're going to see yourself knocked out of the combat sequence very fast. Not to mention, some opponents are themes that can only be absorbed in a particular manner, most of which requires the player to have acquired some type of technique or some type of skill in order to do so, and you will be able to acquire these only through exploration. Now, onto the exploration aspect of Wordless. Although this game sees the player traverse different biomes or zones of this self-contained world, please keep in mind that everything is connected to each other. Literally, you can run to the edge of the map and either end up on the opposite side or in a different section. While I'm talking about the map, reading this thing is what would probably take a second or two to grasp. But as a helpful hint, always remember that the very center of this hub area where all the doors leading to the different areas are located, please keep in mind that these doors go counterclockwise in regards to your current location. Throughout your journeys and other than your battles, you will come across certain things that each area will contain, and I would strongly suggest that you pay attention to. The first that I want to talk about are these talisman looking items that you will see floating about. But it isn't like you could just go to one of these things and get it simply. Well, maybe in the beginning, but throughout the game, obtaining these things is a puzzle within itself. Some will consist of being time obstacles, going to different areas to find different lights, and even paying attention and memorizing patterns to input. There are a lot of these themes, and it does seem a lot, but it's worth it. There are also these seemingly fallen entities that will give you more of these orbs to get skills if you find them. The next item you'll be able to find are these things that can increase your health or how many times you can take damage. You get these by ripping the heads off of dead beings. Talk about morbid. Next are these green triangles that, when all are found, grants entry into a room that probably possesses the most challenging obstacle course Wordless has to offer. But if you can get by it, you'll get something that is straight up amazing. And last but certainly not least are these stone tablets. What I can tell you about these is that they open doors to a certain location that will make sense towards the end of the game, but what they really do is mark all of the locations of the things that I'm telling you about. So all you have to do is just go and pick them up. But please be mindful, you can only access this after you obtain a certain thing. Now, before I go to the next segment, I really want to talk about the importance of exploring regions, a lot of which may not initially be accessible, such as passageways, items, and even some enemies won't even be absorbed or defeated until the player has acquired certain abilities, which would then allow them to progress and defeat those enemies. This is a metroidvania after all, so there would be some backtracking involved, so expect some platforming puzzles, but in terms of gameplay, things really get interesting when you meet this guy here. And I think that's the second time I hinted at this, but overall, Wordless is a well-crafted game, and it's fun. The music for Wordless was done by the Barcelona musicians known as Berliners, who is responsible for delivering us some of the most emotional and captivating music compositions to better help immerse the player into this world. This isn't the first time that we over here at dyxnt have heard of Berliners, and as a matter of fact, they were also responsible for the previous game's music that we did a review for called Neva. If you like Wordless, we strongly suggest that you go ahead and check out what we had to say about that title. Link will be in the description below. Wordless' original soundtrack is 18 tracks long and features some of the most atmospheric and ethereal tunes presented in audio format. To be honest, one could just put this kind of music on and go into an epic meditative state and have their imagination go wild or even rest peacefully too. If you don't believe me, you can check it out for yourself. I will provide links within the description below so you can go ahead and have a listen for yourself. One thing that I can say about Wordless is that its sound design is booming. The first time I heard this big bang in the beginning, I just simply melted. But the majority of the sounds, or at least the most satisfying sounds to me, comes from when you're within active combat. This is where the hits sound hard and the damage can be felt from your ears. Case in point, when you have this lightning spell at level 1, it sounds weak of course. But then when you hit that level 3 though? Also, the main character that you play as, when it walks around, sounds like it's made of glass. And some of the environmental sounds are nice ASMR. Throughout my gameplay while I was playing, I plugged my headphones into the controller and it just sounded amazing. Overall, the sound design is astounding. Wordless is a very unique metroidvania that adds something new to the expected stereotypical elements found within its contemporaries. This game doesn't go by levels, but instead relies on the player observing, adapting, and finding which is more effective given the situation and circumstances within its gaming mechanics. The visuals are amazing, and what I like were those surprise animations the player could do when they perform certain actions. One in particular that I couldn't get enough of was seeing this tailored parry move that you can see facing off this one particular enemy. It never gets old. Wordless sound design is booming and of good quality. The music, I mean, come on, look, it's Berliners. Need I say more? Overall, I enjoyed Wordless and what it has to offer. I do, however, have a few criticisms though, and majority of it is in regards to that abstract ending. I really wish there is a Wordless 2 or some type of DLC or something. I and many other people want to see more Wordless, but until that, or if that even happens, you can check out Wordless for yourself. It's now available for Xbox Series S and X, PlayStation 4 and 5, Steam for PC, and a Nintendo Switch for $20. And until next time, be safe out there, and peace y'all.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit up that notification bell, and I gotta go.